Have you ever walked into your own childhood home and realized you're not welcome anymore? Not because of anything you did, but because of a dog. Not even your dog. Your sister's. It sounds like a joke, right? I wish it were. But that was the moment everything changed. The moment I realized my parents had made their choice. And it wasn't me. They picked a dog over their own daughter. If you're enjoying this so far, hit subscribe, tap the like button, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I'd love to know. By the way, I'm Meera Patel. I'm 24, and until recently, I worked full-time as a library archivist in Portland. The kind of person who's never made waves, never broken rules. I've always done what was expected: quiet, steady, dependable Meera. The good daughter. But this? What happened last winter changed how I see everything. My family, my place in it, and what it really means to walk away when you've had enough. It started with a text. No greeting. No how are you. Just a blunt message from my mom that said, Jesse's dog has a medical condition. She's moving in with us for a while. You'll need to find somewhere else. That was it. No we love you. No we'll figure this out. Not even a phone call. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Jessie, my older sister, was always the golden child, the storm wrapped in silk that everyone tiptoed around. And now her chihuahua, Pudding, had a heart murmur or something, and suddenly I was the one getting evicted? I'd been living in the downstairs apartment of my parents' house for 2 years. Ever since grad school, I'd paid rent, contributed to groceries, helped them with tech stuff, and even took care of Mom during her knee surgery. And now I was being kicked out, for a dog? I didn't respond right away. I read that message a dozen times, my thumb hovering over the keyboard, a low thrum of disbelief settling into my bones. Surely, she didn't mean it like that. Maybe she was just stressed. Maybe Pudding was in worse shape than I thought, and this was just her panicking. Right? But then I remembered the last time I'd heard from Jessie, 3 months ago, maybe more, and how she'd barely made eye contact with me at Thanksgiving. She only ever texted the family group chat when she needed something. Or when she wanted everyone to fawn over that tiny, shaky dog of hers like it was royalty. And now, apparently, I was the sacrifice. I finally wrote back. Wait, you're kicking me out? I pay rent. Where am I supposed to go? She replied a minute later, like she'd been waiting. We'll give you 2 weeks. Jessie needs the whole lower level. Pudding can't handle stairs. Sorry, but we're all going through a lot right now. Please don't make this harder. Please don't make this harder? The irony nearly knocked the breath out of me. As if I was the problem here. As if I was being unreasonable for needing a place to live, in the apartment I was already paying for. I paced my room for what felt like hours that night, scrolling through my lease receipts, rereading old texts from Mom where she'd thanked me for being such a help around the house, and trying to make sense of it. There was no formal lease, just Venmo payments labeled rent, which meant I had no legal claim. And deep down, I think I always knew this could happen. But I never thought they'd be the ones to do it to me. I didn't cry that night. Not yet. I just felt hollow. Like something inside me had cracked wide open, and I couldn't quite hear my own thoughts over the echo. The next day, I came home from work early. Mom was in the kitchen, chopping carrots like it was any other Tuesday, humming along to an old Bollywood song on the radio. She looked up, startled, then tried to smile like we were fine. I didn't let her speak first. So, that's it? I asked. I'm being kicked out because Jessie's dog can't do stairs? She didn't even flinch. It's temporary, she said, avoiding my eyes. Just until Pudding's medication stabilizes. Jessie's been really stressed. We're just trying to help her. You know how sensitive that dog is. I stared at her. Mom. Do you hear yourself? You're asking me, your daughter, to move out for a dog. She sighed, as if I were being dramatic. Mira, don't make this bigger than it is. You're young. You'll bounce back. You don't have a family to support, like your sister. That part stung. Harder than I expected. I'd always known that, to my parents, Jessie's chaotic life demanded more attention. More patience. More everything. But to hear them say it out loud, that my stability, my independence, somehow made me less deserving of their care, it crushed me. So because I don't have a husband or a dog, I'm disposable? Mom flinched at that, but didn't deny it. We're just trying to keep the peace, she said softly. You know how your sister gets. I think that was the moment I really saw it, the whole warped family dynamic laid bare. Jessie didn't just get her way. She required it, like oxygen. And my parents had spent decades bending themselves to accommodate her. Even if it meant breaking me in the process. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just nodded slowly, turned around, and went back downstairs. And that was the night I decided to leave, not just the house. But the entire way I'd been living. The night I started writing the letter that would change everything. The first few lines of the letter were easy. Almost too easy. I'd always been the kind of person who edited as I went, even in texts, even in grocery lists. But that night, the words poured out of me like a dam had cracked somewhere I didn't know existed. To Mom and Dad, I paused, staring at the glowing cursor on my laptop screen. That phrase felt too polite. Too formal. Like I was writing a college application or a sympathy card. I hit backspace. To the people who raised me, and who just showed me how little I mattered to them. That felt more honest. My fingers didn't stop for nearly 2 hours. I wrote until my knuckles ached. Until the dim yellow glow of my desk lamp made the room feel like some tiny spotlight in a forgotten basement theater. Until the anger burned away and left something colder, a quiet, unflinching kind of resolve. I didn't shout in the letter. I didn't insult them. That wasn't my style. But I made it clear, I saw what they were doing. I saw who they'd chosen. And this time I was choosing myself. I started packing that same night. Not frantically. Not like some teenager slamming drawers in a tantrum, but with the kind of focused energy I hadn't felt in years. I folded clothes with care. Wrapped my books in brown paper like precious artifacts. Sorted through the boxes I'd shoved under the bed, labeling each one with sharp, tidy handwriting, winter coats. Documents. Kitchen stuff. Every corner of the room became a tiny ritual of letting go. The framed photo of the 4 of us from that one trip to Cannon Beach. I set it aside, then hesitated. I almost packed it. Almost. But then I remembered how Jessie had made us stop every 10 minutes so she could adjust Pudding's sun hat. How she'd thrown a tantrum in the seafood restaurant because the waiter brought her water in a plastic cup instead of glass. How Mom had cried that night and blamed me for setting Jessie off because I'd asked if we could just have one day without drama. I put the photo face down in a drawer. That memory could stay buried. It wasn't that I didn't have options. I had a decent job, some savings, and a quiet colleague named Harper who'd once offered me her couch if I ever needed to get away from the madness. At the time, I thought she was being dramatic. But now? Now I texted her at 1:34 a.m. Hey, is your offer still good? Just for a week or 2. I can bring my own blankets. She replied 3 minutes later. Bless her insomniac soul. Of course. Bring wine. And I mean the good stuff. You okay? I didn't know how to answer that. So I just sent a heart emoji and kept packing. By the next morning, I had 4 boxes stacked neatly by the door and a plan. I'd take 2 days off work. Move into Harper's guest room. And from there, I'd find a studio, something tiny, something fully mine. It wasn't ideal, but it would be mine. No shared kitchens. No parent-issued guilt trips. No dogs dictating the course of my life. when I came upstairs for breakfast. Mostly to get coffee and avoid suspicion, the house was suspiciously quiet. Until I heard the click-click of tiny claws on the hardwood floor. Pudding. There she was, perched on the ottoman like a furry queen surveying her kingdom. Her ears twitched at the sound of my footsteps. Then she sneezed, once, dramatically, and looked away. "Don't take it personally," a voice behind me said. "She's been upset since the drive." I turned around to see Jessie, holding an oat milk latte like she'd just walked off the set of some influencer's vlog. She looked effortless, as usual. Not a hair out of place. Wearing leggings that probably cost more than my whole monthly grocery bill. And worst of all? She smiled at me. "Hey, Mira. Thanks for being chill about all this. I know it's awkward. But you're a real trooper." I blinked. That was it. That was her grand acknowledgement. No apology. No recognition that I was losing my home so she could coddle her purse dog in peace. My voice came out quieter than I expected. "Jessie, do you even realize what you're asking of me?" She tilted her head like I'd asked her to explain quantum mechanics. Yeah? But it's not forever. And pudding really can't handle stairs." The vet said, "I'm not a spare room," I said, cutting her off. Her smile faltered for half a second. Then she shrugged. "Okay. Well. I guess you've made your decision." She walked past me, latte in hand, as if that settled everything. And in a way, maybe it did. Because I knew, right then, that the letter wasn't just necessary. It was long overdue. That night, I printed the letter. Not from my laptop, I didn't want any chance of second-guessing it while staring at a screen. I saved it as a PDF, took it to the local print and chip shop on 12th and Main, and asked the guy behind the counter for thick paper, the good kind. The kind you use for resumes or wedding invitations. He gave me a weird look, like he was expecting a job application. But I just smiled and said, "It's personal." And it was. This wasn't a rant. It wasn't some revenge note filled with bile and blame. It was something else entirely, a quiet, calculated dissection of everything they'd taught me to believe. About family. About love. About what being the good daughter had actually cost me. You taught me to share. You taught me to compromise. You taught me that family comes first, even when it hurts. But I see now that those rules only ever applied to me. Jessie breaks things, and you hand her glue. I bend to keep the peace, and you still call me difficult when I finally speak up. I'm not leaving because of the dog. I'm leaving because you looked me in the eye and told me, in so many words, that she matters more. This is the last time I'll let that be true. I folded the letter carefully. Slid it into a blank white envelope. Wrote "Read this after I'm gone" on the front in thick black pen. Then I went back home, if I could still call it that, and walked past Jessie in the living room without saying a word. She was watching some reality show, curled up under a throw blanket with pudding on her lap. When she saw me, she smirked. "Heading out?" she asked, voice syrupy sweet. "Can you pick up oat milk?" Pudding's still anxious from the move, and the regular kind gives her gas. I didn't even stop walking. The audacity wasn't even surprising anymore. It was just exhausting. That night was my last one in that house. I could feel it in the way the walls seemed to close in on me. In the way the lights buzzed overhead like they didn't want me there either. Even my own bed felt unfamiliar, like it had decided it belonged to someone else now. I didn't sleep much. Just stared at the ceiling, listening to the muffled hum of the TV upstairs and the occasional yip from Pudding's high-pitched bark. It used to be so different. I remembered the nights Mom would come downstairs just to check on me if I so much as coughed. The way Dad used to leave post-it notes on my door with dumb puns or inside jokes, "You Mira CLE worker," or "Don't forget to be awesome." Stuff that felt silly at the time, but now, it ached just thinking about it. Where did that version of them go? Or maybe, they'd only ever existed for Jessie, and I'd been borrowing the scraps. In the morning, I left the letter on the dining room table. Right next to the salt shaker shaped like a tiny elephant, the one I'd given Mom for Mother's Day 3 years ago. She'd loved elephants. Said they reminded her of her own mother. I stood there for a moment, looking at the two things side by side. A gift I'd once given with love, and the final truth I was now leaving behind. Then I walked out the door. Box of essentials in my trunk. A grocery tote stuffed with comfort snacks on the passenger seat. My laptop bag, a few books, and the sweater Harper always said made me look like I ran a tiny bookshop in a European village. I didn't look back. But as I pulled onto the main road, something strange bubbled up in my chest. Not sadness. Not guilt. Suspicion. A gnawing little voice that whispered, what if they don't even read it? What if they just see the envelope and toss it aside? What if Jessie finds it first, laughs, and crumples it into the recycling bin? The idea infuriated me, not just because I'd poured so much of myself into that letter, but because it would be so like them to brush past it. To pretend like nothing had happened. To rewrite the narrative into something easier to live with. Mira overreacted. She was always so sensitive. She made it harder than it had to be. I gripped the wheel tighter. No. Not this time. If they chose to ignore what I wrote, that would be on them. But I had spoken my truth. Clearly. Calmly. With the full weight of every ignored slight and swallowed emotion stacked into every sentence. Let them face that. Let them read it, or not, either way, they would know I had left not in anger, but in clarity. And clarity, I was learning, was far more powerful than rage. Harper's apartment was on the 4th floor of an old red brick building with crooked hallways and a temperamental elevator that wheezed like a dying accordion. It was perfect. She met me at the door in pajama pants, holding a chipped mug and a half-eaten croissant. You look like someone just told you fiction's illegal, she said, stepping aside. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. I didn't cry when I hugged her. Not at first. But once she wrapped her arms around me, all the pressure I'd been holding back, like an overinflated balloon, finally burst. It wasn't a sob. Not yet. Just a long, shuddering exhale that made my shoulders shake. She didn't ask questions. Just guided me inside, handed me tea, and gestured toward the couch like a battlefield nurse saying, "You've earned this." That first night in Harper's guest room. A narrow space stuffed with books, old art prints, and a lava lamp she refused to get rid of, I lay on the futon and stared at the ceiling fan, which clicked unevenly as it turned. Click. Click. Click click. Pause. Repeat. That stupid rhythm matched the looping thoughts in my head. Every time I started to doze off, my brain shoved more questions at me. Was I being selfish? Was I overreacting? Should I have tried harder to explain how hurt I was? Should I have stayed just a little longer, to keep the peace? I hated that part of me, the part that kept looking for ways to blame myself for other people's choices. Harper called it invisible daughter syndrome. She'd named it during one of our lunch breaks at the library months ago, after she caught me apologizing to someone who'd spilled coffee on me. You shrink so other people can stretch, she'd said. You make yourself easier to love. And they don't even notice you're disappearing. That line stuck with me more than I wanted to admit. 3 days passed. I went to work. Smiled when I needed to. Filed reports, processed old manuscripts, listened to the brittle crinkle of 19th century paper under my gloves. There was something soothing about it, a reminder that even fragile things could survive a long, long time. But every evening when I came back to Harper's place, the letter gnawed at me. Had they read it? Had they felt it? I checked my phone obsessively, even though I told myself I wouldn't. No texts. No missed calls. Just silence. Jessie posted an Instagram story of putting snuggled in a weighted blanket with the caption, "My little heart warrior." 2 hearts. Mom liked it. Dad commented, give her extra treats from Grandpa. I stared at the screen for a full minute before I turned my phone over and left it face down on the nightstand. Then, on the fourth day, I cracked. I called. I don't know what I expected. Maybe some version of an apology. Oh, we didn't realize how much we hurt you. Or even just, acknowledgement. Mom answered. Her voice was cheerful in that way that immediately made me suspicious. Oh. Mira. We were wondering when we'd hear from you. How are you settling in? I blinked. You were wondering? She ignored the edge in my voice. Jessie said Harper's place is cozy. That's good. At least you're not out on the street, haha. I closed my eyes. Did you read the letter? Pause. A long one. Then, we did. But honestly, sweetheart, it felt a little dramatic. There it was. That word. Dramatic. The dagger dressed in lace. She continued, I mean, we understand you were upset, but everything's been so tense with Jessie's dog and her work situation, and we just didn't have the bandwidth to. I told you how it made me feel, I interrupted. I told you that being treated like I'm optional, like I'm just convenient, is something I can't keep swallowing. Another pause. Then she said, you've always been so sensitive, Mira. Maybe it's time to grow a thicker skin. We love you, but sometimes you make it really hard. My throat tightened. You love me, but not enough to make room for me. Silence. That silence said everything I needed to hear. After we hung up, I didn't cry. I just sat on the edge of the futon, letting the numbness crawl into every part of my body like slow ice. And that was the worst part, not the anger, not the sadness, but the emptiness. The realization that I had spent years twisting myself into shapes for people who only ever noticed when I took up space they didn't want me in. And now, I was finally done. It was Harper who finally got me to breathe again. She didn't ask me what happened after that phone call. She didn't pry or prod. Instead, she showed up at my door the next morning with 2 matcha lattes, a mini whiteboard, and an absurd number of sticky notes. Okay, she said, flopping onto the futon beside me. We're going to build your escape plan. I blinked at her. Escape plan? Yep. Like a heist movie. Except instead of stealing diamonds, we're stealing your peace and dignity back. I laughed. A tiny one, like a bubble that managed to float up past all the wreckage inside me. She grinned. That's the first laugh I've gotten in 4 days. Progress. She uncapped a marker and started scribbling. The whiteboard said, Operation, Bounce Back Badass. Underneath, she wrote 3 bullet points. Find your own space, set new boundaries, reclaim your narrative. I stared at it. That's actually really good. Harper pointed the marker at me like a sword. I'm a professional librarian, Mira. Organizing chaos is my kink. That made me laugh harder, a real laugh this time, and it loosened something inside me I hadn't realized was clenched so tight. We spent the next 2 hours combing through apartment listings, budgeting out my finances, and organizing my resume just in case I wanted to upgrade jobs while I was at it. It felt proactive. Tangible. I hadn't realized how much power I'd given up, not just to my parents, but to the narrative I'd built around myself, the one where I was always accommodating, always quiet, always grateful for whatever corner I was allowed to occupy. Now, for the first time, I was asking, what do I actually want? The answer surprised me. I didn't want a mansion. I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want an apology anymore. I just wanted peace. Space. The freedom to exist without constantly shrinking. That afternoon, Harper took me to an open house for a tiny 1-bedroom unit above a corner flower shop. The floors creaked. The walls needed paint. The stove was older than I was. But it had a view of the city skyline and a window nook that begged for a beanbag chair and a stack of books. I think it's perfect, I whispered. Harper beamed. It's got Mira vibes. Quiet resilience. Cozy rage. I laughed again. Is that a new tea blend? It should be. Later that night, I sat alone in Harper's kitchen with my laptop open and my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I was writing something new. Not a letter. Not a journal entry. A blog post. I'd been quietly maintaining a blog called Ink Between Lines since college. Mostly book reviews, poetry scraps, and observations about working in archives. But now I was writing something personal. Something real. Something raw. Sometimes, the people who raise you will teach you to disappear, and call it love. Sometimes, they'll praise your silence and shame your truth. And sometimes, walking away isn't rebellion. It's rebirth. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. But when I posted it, something shifted. Not just in me, but in the comments that started to trickle in. Strangers saying, I feel this. Others writing, thank you for putting this into words. One person simply wrote, I thought I was the only one. I wasn't alone. I wasn't overreacting. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. I shut my laptop, pulled Harper's quilt up over my shoulders, and looked out the window at the city lights blinking back at me like tiny pulses of hope. I didn't know exactly what was coming next. But I knew one thing, it was going to be mine. The first official confrontation came exactly 8 days after I left. It was a Sunday afternoon. I'd just gotten back from another apartment viewing, a shoebox studio with peeling laminate floors but excellent sunlight, and was reheating leftover tikka masala when my phone buzzed. Not a text. A call. From Dad. I stared at the screen like it was an alien artifact. We hadn't spoken since before the dog ultimatum. He hadn't even acknowledged my letter. Not directly. Not through text. Not even through one of his cryptic forwarded articles, which used to be his way of nudging me toward good behavior. I answered. Hello? There was a pause. Then his voice came through, softer than I expected. Like he was trying to sound calm, but didn't quite know how. Mira. Your mother and I want to talk. About what? I asked. About everything. Another pause. Can you come for dinner? Just a conversation. My stomach twisted. Part of me wanted to scream, are you serious? Another part, the part still tethered to the years of family dinners and inside jokes and the version of Dad who used to sneak me extra samosas, ached to say yes. I hesitated. Will Jessie be there? A beat. She might stop by. But this is about you. Not her. I didn't trust that. Not for a second. But I said yes anyway. Harper wasn't thrilled. You know it's going to be a trap, she warned, pacing as I folded the least wrinkled outfit I owned into a neat square. They're going to gaslight you into thinking you're the problem. I know. Then why go? I shrugged. Because I need to know I've said everything I needed to. Even if they don't hear it. She paused, then softened. Okay. But I'm putting my phone on max volume. One word, avocado, and I'm coming to rescue you like Liam Neeson. I smiled. Noted. I drove to the house just as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting long golden shadows across the lawn, like the house was trying to dress itself in warmth. A fake comfort. The porch light was already on. Same house, same bricks, same smell of lavender and old wood. But it didn't feel like home anymore. Not even a little. Inside, the dining table was set. Cloth napkins. Real silverware. My favorite rice pilaf. The effort was so deliberate it made me instantly suspicious. Mom greeted me with a tight smile. You look thinner. I didn't reply. Dad gestured to my seat, the one I'd always sat in, like that somehow made this normal again. For a few moments, it was civil. Small talk about work. The library. How cold it had been lately. Nothing real. Nothing true. Then Dad cleared his throat and looked me square in the eye. We read your letter. All of it. I didn't speak. He continued, you had some strong feelings. Mom chimed in, very emotional. A little harsh, maybe. But we understand. I raised an eyebrow. Do you? She smiled. You felt displaced. Overlooked. And we're sorry you interpreted things that way. You interpreted things that way. It hit me like a slap made of velvet. Gentle, but still a slap. That's not what I wrote, I said. I said I was displaced. You literally told me to leave my home. For a dog. Dad held up a hand. Let's not dramatize. I'm not dramatizing. I'm stating facts. Mom shifted in her seat. Jessie's going through a lot. You know she has anxiety. Her therapist said pudding helps with her. I had anxiety too, I cut in. During grad school, when I was working 3 jobs and barely sleeping. No one offered me the master bedroom and oat milk. They went silent. So I kept going. Do you even hear yourselves? You keep saying you understand, but every time I tell you how I feel, you treat it like a character flaw. Dad leaned forward. Mira, we've always been proud of you. But you don't have to make this into some big dramatic exit. Families have bumps. This is a bump. No, I said quietly. This is a canyon. And you watched me fall into it and asked me to stop making noise. They both stared at me. Mom's eyes shimmered like she wanted to cry. Dad's mouth was a thin line. For the first time, I saw how old they looked. How tired. But that didn't change what had happened. I didn't come here to argue, I said. I came here to say, I love you. But I won't keep shrinking to make room for people who never do the same for me. Dad exhaled. So what do you want? An apology? No, I said. I want respect. And with that, I stood. They didn't stop me. Not this time. Mom whispered something, maybe my name. Maybe nothing at all. Dad just watched me with unreadable eyes. I walked out the front door, got into my car, and drove away, again. But this time I didn't look back. I wasn't running. I was reclaiming. And that made all the difference. The car ride home was quiet. No music. No podcasts. Just the hum of the engine and the occasional whisper of tires gliding over pavement. I should have felt powerful. Triumphant, even. I'd stood my ground. I'd said the words I'd held in for years. I hadn't let their guilt tricks or performative dinner sway me. But instead of pride, I felt hollow. Like I'd cut the last fraying string on a kite, and now I was just drifting. I pulled into Harper's building, parked, and sat there for a few minutes staring out the windshield. My hands were still wrapped around the steering wheel, knuckles white. It's over, I thought. You did what you came to do. But the feeling that crept in wasn't peace. It was loss. Harper was curled up on the couch in her panda onesie, watching reruns of Buffy and eating dry cereal straight from the box when I came in. She muted the TV. Avocado? I shook my head. No emergency extraction required. I dropped onto the couch beside her, my body suddenly too heavy for its own skeleton. They read the letter, I said. Sort of. Skimmed it emotionally, at least. Harper offered the cereal box wordlessly. I took a handful. They said I was emotional. Overreacting. That it's just a bump. She snorted. That's not a bump. That's a sinkhole. I nodded, chewing slowly. But I didn't yell. I said what I needed to. I didn't let them turn it into my fault. Harper leaned her head against mine. That's huge, babe. I know it hurts, but that's healing. That's choosing you. But later that night, when I was finally alone again, the doubts came crawling back. In the quiet, I heard their voices again, not the ones from today, but all the ones from my childhood. Mira, just let it go. Don't make it awkward. Jessie needs more help right now. Why are you always so sensitive? They weren't just memories. They were programming. I'd been raised on the idea that keeping peace meant swallowing myself whole. That boundaries were selfish. That love meant patience and silence and sacrificing what you needed so others could feel better. And now that I'd stepped out of that role, I didn't know who I was without it. The world felt too big. Too quiet. Like I'd walked off a stage and forgotten where the exits were. I curled up under Harper's quilt and stared at the ceiling until my eyes burned. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe I should have stayed. Maybe I am too sensitive. I reached for my phone. Not to call them, but to reread the blog post I'd written, and the comments. The words from strangers who got it. Who felt seen. Who said things like "you told my story," and this gave me the courage to finally move out. One comment stood out: sometimes being the black sheep just means you stopped pretending to be wool. I read it twice. And something inside me clicked back into place, not fully, but enough. I wasn't unraveling. I was shedding. And sometimes that looked a lot like breaking. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. Not because I was rested, far from it. My dreams had been a tangled mess of half-remembered conversations and rooms that kept shifting beneath my feet. But I woke up with a thought so clear it might as well have been written on my ceiling: if they won't change, I will. For so long, I'd measured my worth by their comfort. Their approval. Their willingness to claim me in the ways I needed, even if they never could. But that chapter was closed now. And I was going to write something better, starting with my own space. That day, I called the property manager of the flower shop apartment. Her name was Leona, and she answered on the second ring. Warm voice. No nonsense. Good timing, she said. You're the quiet one with the book blog, right? The guy who toured after you wanted to turn it into a creative vape lounge. I laughed. Guilty. She chuckled. It's yours if you want it. Lease starts the 1st of next month. And just like that, I had a home. A real one. No shared walls with passive-aggressive sisters. No parental check-ins disguised as guilt trips. Just me, my books, my mismatched mugs, and a window that caught the sun at exactly the right angle. I hung up and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Then I texted Harper. Got it. I'm officially a leaseholder. Phase 1 of Operation Bounce Back Badass equals complete. She replied with confetti gifs, 6 YASSS texts, and one audio message of her yelling, "The eagle has landed." That night, I started gathering things, not just the essentials, but the fragments of myself I wanted to bring into this next chapter. A worn paperback copy of The Secret Garden with my childhood doodles in the margins. A candle that smelled like rain and sandalwood. The tea strainer Dad bought me freshman year. Because even if I couldn't forgive everything, I could keep what still held warmth. I made a playlist. A slow-building mix of piano instrumentals, alt-pop anthems, and lo-fi beats that felt like motion. Like forward. And then, without overthinking it, I opened a new blog post draft and typed, "This is what starting over feels like." Not a firework. Not a bang. Just the quiet click of a lock turning, and a door finally opening inward. 2 hours later, the post had over 600 shares. People sent messages. Others reblogged with their own versions of the door metaphor. One woman wrote, "I left my parents' house at 28. This made me feel less alone." Another said, "Your story gave me permission to stop apologizing for choosing peace." And just like that, I felt it again. That tiny, glowing pulse of purpose. Not everything was fixed. My heart still ached. My family hadn't suddenly morphed into people who could say I'm sorry without conditions. But I had found something they never gave me, the strength to choose myself. And that, more than any apology, was the beginning of freedom. 3 days before I moved into the flower shop apartment, I got a text from Jessie. It was short. No emojis. No passive-aggressive tone. Can we talk? Just us. Not mom or dad. At first, I stared at the screen like it was a trapdoor. This was the same sister who'd watched me pack my life into boxes without flinching. Who once called me melodramatic for crying after a breakup and then made the entire family cancel a trip to Maui because her boyfriend forgot their 6-month anniversary. I nearly deleted the message. But something in the wording, just us, made me pause. I didn't owe her anything. But part of me wanted to know. So I replied, meet me at Perkins Park. Tomorrow. Noon. Neutral ground. The park was almost empty when I arrived. It was one of those crisp spring mornings that flirted with the idea of warmth, sunlight threading through the trees, kids chasing pigeons, that hopeful smell of wet earth and fresh grass. Jessie was already there, sitting stiffly on the bench, sunglasses on, putting in a fuzzy harness curled up beside her like a spoiled throw pillow. I sat down on the opposite end of the bench. She took off her sunglasses slowly. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Not crying, but definitely not dry. Thanks for coming, she said. I nodded. There was a long silence. The kind that stretches so tight you can hear every breath, every shift of wind. Then she spoke. Look. I know I haven't been easy to deal with. And I know I've taken up a lot of space in the family. More than I probably should have. That caught me off guard. She looked down at her lap. I read your letter. Mom tried to summarize it for me, but I went back and found the whole thing. Another pause. It messed me up. Not because you were wrong. But because I think I knew. Deep down. That I've always been the center of the universe, and you've been the orbit. I stared at her. This wasn't the Jessie I knew. She sighed. When Pudding got sick, I panicked. She's the only thing that's mine, you know? Everything else in my life is just chaos. But her? She's constant. I didn't think about what it would cost you. I didn't want to. I folded my arms, unsure if I believed this version of her. And now? She looked up. Now I don't know how to undo it. But I wanted to say I'm sorry. Like, really sorry. You didn't deserve any of that. She hesitated. I've been talking to someone. A real therapist this time. Not just Instagram quotes. And she said I've been using the family as a crutch. That I never learned how to not be the emergency. That landed. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. Not outright. She wasn't trying to fix it. Not exactly. She was showing up. Flawed. Honest. And for the first time in our entire lives, I saw her not as the chaos, but as someone who was tired of being it. I nodded slowly. I appreciate that, I said. But it doesn't erase what happened. I know. I can't move backward, Jess. I'm building something new now. She smiled. Not sad. Not forced. Just real. I hope it's beautiful. We sat there for a while, just two sisters watching birds dive into puddles and toddlers chase after bubbles. Nothing was fixed. But something had shifted. And sometimes, that's enough. Move-in day arrived like a long exhale. Leona handed me the keys with a wink and a no vaping DJs showed up overnight, so it's all yours, and just like that, I was standing in the center of my very own apartment. It smelled like old plaster and sunshine. The floor creaked when I walked. The windows rattled slightly when the wind blew. I loved it immediately. Harper helped me carry in the boxes, mostly by dramatically tossing pillows onto the futon and declaring herself director of interior aesthetic. She even brought a potted plant named Saffron as a housewarming gift. She's clingy and thrives on indirect light, she said. Just like you. We laughed, hard. The kind that makes your chest ache in a good way. I hung fairy lights around the window. Set up my bookshelf like a shrine. Made a little tea station by the sink. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt safe. Like nothing could be taken from me. Until 2 nights later, when the doorbell buzzed. I wasn't expecting anyone. It was already past 9, and Harper never showed up without texting me first. I opened the door cautiously, and froze. It was Dad. Not dressed up. Not composed. He looked tired. His coat was unbuttoned. His face unshaved. He held something in his hand, a manila envelope, thick and worn at the corners. "Mira," he said, his voice hoarse. "Can I come in?" My stomach flipped. Part of me wanted to say no. Part of me wanted to slam the door, bolt it, and hide under a blanket until the air was clear again. But I stepped aside. He entered slowly, taking in the apartment like it was a museum. His eyes landed on the bookshelf, then the fairy lights, then the potted plant by the window. "It's nice," he said. I didn't respond. He sat on the edge of the futon, gripping the envelope like it might disappear. "I've been reading your blog," he said quietly. My heart stuttered. He didn't look up. Just kept his eyes on the envelope. I started with the one about the letter. Then the post about starting over. "I've read every one since." Silence. Then, "I didn't realize how much we were hurting you." I folded my arms. "No one ever does until it's too loud to ignore." He nodded. "That's fair." He finally looked up at me. And for the first time I saw him without the father filter. Just a man. Flawed. Scared. Regretful. "I brought something," he said, handing me the envelope. I opened it slowly. Inside were letters. Handwritten ones. Dozens of them. Some were dated years ago. Some from the week I moved out. Others were undated drafts, half-written, scribbled through, torn and taped back together. They were all from him. "I don't know how to fix this. I wish I'd listened more. You deserved better. I'm scared I broke something that can't be unbroken." I read them in stunned silence. "This isn't me trying to fix everything in one night," he said. "But I wanted you to know I heard you. Finally. Not through Mom's version. Not through Jesse's excuses. Through you." I looked up. "I don't know what to say." He smiled, eyes glistening. "You don't have to. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. And I'm proud of you." That night, after he left, I sat on the floor of my tiny apartment surrounded by letters from a man who had finally seen his daughter. I didn't know what would happen next. If things would ever be normal again. If I even wanted them to be. But I knew this much: I wasn't invisible anymore. And that was a start. After Dad left, the silence in the apartment felt louder than ever. Not empty, just full of things unspoken. I sat on the floor for over an hour, the letters spread around me like puzzle pieces, each one revealing a fragment of a man I'd never fully seen. He'd written them in ballpoint pen, his familiar blocky handwriting soft. At the edges. Some had coffee stains. Others had clear signs of being folded and unfolded over and over again. But it wasn't the words that undid me, it was the fact that he'd written them at all. Because growing up, Dad wasn't the expressive one. He was the make a joke instead of a confession kind. The rub some dirt on it brand of emotional support. Every now and then, he'd offer a quiet "I'm proud of you," but only when I hit milestones, graduation, job offers, predictable success. He had never said "I'm sorry." Until now. I wanted to believe this was the beginning of something. But when I called the house the next day, it was Mom who answered. Her voice was clipped. Cold. You spoke to your father. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. He came to my place. He brought me letters. Silence. Then, that wasn't his place. We agreed we'd give you space. I frowned. Space, or silence? She sighed heavily, like I was the one being unreasonable. You wrote things that hurt us, Mira. Deeply. That letter, your blog, they were true, I said calmly. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was trying to stop hurting myself. She didn't respond. I kept going. You don't have to agree with how I did it. But I'm not going to apologize for speaking up. For choosing myself. Still, she said nothing. So I pushed further, because this wasn't just about the letter anymore. I need to know, I said. Do you think what you did was right? Kicking me out? There was a pause. Then, finally, I think families do what they have to do. Jessie needed us. She still does. My chest tightened. So I didn't? That's not what I meant. But that's what you said. The line went quiet. I love you, she said at last. But sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes it has to be earned. That did it. That one sentence sliced through me like ice. Earned? Like I was a guest in my own bloodline. I hung up. For the next 2 days, I didn't write. Didn't blog. Didn't read. I sat with that line. Turned it over in my mind like a stone I couldn't throw away. Sometimes love has to be earned. I wanted to scream. To break something. To crawl back into the version of myself that still believed parents were infallible. But instead, I reached for one of Dad's letters. The one with the tear in the corner and a single sentence underlined twice. I don't know how to go back, but I'd follow you forward if you let me. I clutched that letter to my chest. And that night, for the first time in weeks, I let myself cry. Not from anger. Not from grief. But from the brutal, aching, beautiful hope that maybe, just maybe, some things could still grow in the fallout. The next morning, I woke up with something I hadn't felt in weeks: focus. Not the panicked kind that screams fix it now. This was quieter. Stronger. Like the sun rising steadily after a storm. I brewed tea, opened my curtains, and sat at my little table by the window. My favorite spot in the apartment now, watching the early light dance across the rooftops. There was no email from Mom. No text from Jessie. But there was a message in my blog inbox. From someone named Neha. I'm 19. My parents just told me I have to drop out of art school and move home to be useful. I read your letter blog and just, thank you. I thought I was weak for wanting to leave. You made me feel brave. I stared at it for a long time. Then I hit reply. Neha. Wanting peace isn't weakness. It's wisdom. You're not running away. You're walking towards something better. Keep walking. I hit send. And suddenly, I knew exactly what I needed to do. That day, I started writing something bigger. Not just another blog post, a full essay. A chapter, almost. I called it the Good Daughter Myth. It started with a quote from the letter I'd written to my parents: love isn't something we should have to compete for. And then I dug deep. I wrote about the difference between being loved for who you are versus being tolerated for what you provide. I talked about being the easy one in a family, the one who never needed saving, and so never got seen. I unpacked the guilt, the manipulation, the internalized belief that being quiet made you good. And I ended it with this: I stopped being the good daughter the day I realized good wasn't the same as whole. I'd rather be whole. It wasn't just writing. It was reclamation. Within 48 hours, the post had gone viral. Tens of thousands of views. Shares on mental health forums, in Desi family groups, even translated into Spanish and Hindi by followers who wanted their own parents to understand. The comments section turned into a cascade of me too. People from all walks of life, daughters, sons, non-binary kids, all saying the same thing. I thought I was alone. You gave me words I didn't know I needed. You made me feel seen. And I realized something powerful. Maybe my parents couldn't see me. But the world could. I wasn't just healing, I was helping. And in that, I found something stronger than closure. I found power. Not over them, over me. Over my own narrative. My own choices. My own voice. For the first time in my life, I wasn't Mira the placeholder. Mira the backup plan. Mira the easy one. I was Mira, the author of her own damn story. That night, I pulled out a yellow notepad, the kind my dad used to keep near the phone when I was a kid, and wrote across the top in thick marker, "What does freedom actually look like?" I stared at the question for a long time. Because it was one thing to cut ties, to walk away, to stop apologizing. But now came the harder part, building something new. Not just a different address or a blog with viral reach. Something sustainable. Solid. Mine. I made 3 columns underneath the question. Column 1. Boundaries I need to set: no returning home, just to keep the peace, no more answering late-night crisis texts unless it's actually a crisis, no more explaining my feelings to people committed to misunderstanding them. Column 2. Things that make me feel safe: writing morning tea by the window, my own keys, quiet friendships that don't ask for performance. Column 3. Goals that belong only to me: finish my short story collection, launch a podcast based on the blog, host a local workshop on self-worth and family guilt, learn how to make my mom's chai, but on my terms. The more I wrote, the more the fog lifted. Not because I had it all figured out, I didn't. There were still days when my throat tightened at unexpected triggers. When I missed my mom's cooking or my dad's quiet jokes. But now I had something stronger than nostalgia: agency. I didn't have to wait for them to make space for me. I was making space for myself. The next morning, I called Harper and pitched her my podcast idea. "Mira," she squealed. "Yes. This is exactly what people need. Call it The Quiet Rebellion or something cool like that. You already have a following. You just need a mic and your voice." I laughed. "I'm thinking, dear former good daughter." She gasped. I'd subscribed so hard. Within 2 hours, she had sent me a list of affordable podcast mics, 3 branding mood boards, and a screenshot of an email she sent to a community center asking if I could host a storytelling event. By lunchtime, we were building something. Not just for me. For everyone who needed to hear what I never got to as a kid. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for approval. Not for clarity. Not for an apology tied up in pretty words. I was done surviving. Now, I was creating. And the next chapter? It wasn't going to be about pain. It was going to be about power. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of a small but packed room at the community center downtown. There were folding chairs, mismatched rugs, strings of fairy lights taped to the ceiling, and a buzzing hum of quiet anticipation from strangers who had all come here, because of me. Because of a letter I had written. Because of a story they saw themselves in. I adjusted the mic. Cleared my throat. And spoke. "My name is Mira," I said, voice steady despite the quiver building behind it. "And I used to believe that love meant being useful. Being quiet. Being good." A soft murmur from the crowd, recognition. I thought if I was easy to live with, they'd keep me close. If I didn't need too much, I'd always have a place. I paused, swallowing. But then I learned something. Something hard. Something necessary. I glanced around the room, people nodding, leaning forward, eyes wide. You can't shrink yourself small enough to make people love you right. The room held its breath. So did I. And then, applause. Not the polite kind. The kind that wraps around your ribs and says, "We see you." After the talk, people lined up to say thank you. One woman with silver hair pressed a note into my hand and whispered, "I left my family at 42. Took me until last year to feel free." A teenager hugged me hard and said, "My mom always tells me I'm lucky I'm not like my sister. But it doesn't feel like luck." A man in his 30s simply said, "You helped me realize I'm not crazy." Each one of them was a mirror, reflecting pieces of me I thought were too strange or shameful to show the world. And now? They were shining. I got home that night, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto my futon with tears on my cheeks. Not from sadness. From rightness. This was the turning point. Not some grand gesture or hallmark moment. But a dozen tiny truths held in the arms of strangers. I wasn't who I used to be. And thank God for that. The momentum from that night carried me into a new kind of clarity. The event at the community center wasn't just a breakthrough, it was proof. Proof that my story wasn't a fluke. Proof that people needed more than just blog posts. Proof that this, sharing truth, guiding others out of silence, could be more than therapy. It could be purpose. So I took the risk. The next morning, I sat down at my laptop and drafted an announcement. "Dear readers, I started this blog as a way to process pain. Now, it's becoming something bigger. I'm launching a podcast. A space for former good kids like me. We'll talk about guilt, identity, boundaries, family, culture, silence, and how to rewrite your story in your own voice. If you've ever been told you're too much, too sensitive, too difficult, this is for you." Then, at the bottom. It's called Dear Former Good Daughter. And it goes live next month. I hit post. And braced myself. The response was overwhelming. Emails. DMs, comments. Even a message from a small publishing imprint asking if I'd ever considered turning my essays into a book. It was terrifying. But it was also electrifying. The risk had opened a door I didn't know existed, one I was finally brave enough to walk through. I made a schedule. Ordered the mic. Wrote a list of episode ideas and potential guests. I even bought a second-hand armchair off Facebook Marketplace for interviews. It squeaked a little when you sat down, but it had charm, the kind that made you feel like your words mattered. But even in all that forward motion, there was one nagging question still poking at me: what happens when they find out? My parents. Would they listen? Would they feel exposed? Would they be angry? And more than anything, would they feel ashamed? Not because I wanted to hurt them, but because deep down, I didn't want to be the villain in their story, even if I was finally the hero in mine. I brought it up to Harper one night while we were sipping chai on my fire escape. "I'm scared they'll hear the podcast and think I'm airing dirty laundry." She shrugged. "Let them. I'm serious." "So am I," she said. "You're not dragging them. You're documenting your experience. You get to tell your story, Mira. You've earned that." "But what if?" She put her mug down, cutting me off gently. "They kicked you out for a dog." That made me laugh. Even now, it still sounded absurd when said out loud. "They silenced you for years," she added. "Now they have to live with what silence costs." That night, I wrote the script for episode 1. This is a story about being invisible. And what it takes to finally, beautifully, take up space. The first episode dropped on a rainy Thursday morning. I didn't expect my parents to hear it so soon. Maybe not at all. But by that afternoon, my phone lit up with Mom across the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mira." Her voice was tight, clipped. "Your father and I just listened to your podcast." I swallowed. "Okay. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? For us? For our friends?" I closed my eyes. "I didn't name you. I didn't name anyone." "That's not the point," she snapped. "Everyone will know who you're talking about." "Then maybe they'll also know why I left," I said, my voice calm, steady. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing hard. You've always been ungrateful, she said finally. We gave you everything. And this is how you repay us? I almost laughed. Not from humor, from the absurdity of it all. You didn't give me everything, Mom. You gave me a roof. You gave me food. But you didn't give me space to be myself. You didn't give me a voice that was safe to use. And when push came to shove, you gave my space to a dog. Her gasp was sharp, like I'd slapped her. That's not fair. It's true. I expected her to hang up. Instead, she said something I didn't see coming. Your father is proud of you. That stopped me cold. What? She sighed, softer this time. He told me. He said you're brave. That he doesn't like hearing it, but maybe we needed to. I didn't speak. You've always been different from Jessie, she continued. We didn't always know what to do with that. It wasn't an apology. But it wasn't denial either. When we hung up, I just sat there, phone still in my hand, staring out at the rain. There it was, the confrontation I'd been bracing for. And somehow, it didn't end in collapse. It ended in a crack. A small one. Just big enough for light to get in. That weekend, Dad called. No agenda. No tension in his voice. Just, how's the apartment? I told him about the squeaky armchair, the fairy lights, the plant Harper named Saffron. I told him I'd recorded episode 2 of the podcast and that people were already messaging me about how much it meant to them. He didn't hesitate. I listened to the first one 3 times, he said. Once to hear you. Twice to hear the you I didn't know. I didn't know how to respond to that. My throat tightened, but not in the painful way. I don't expect you to change everything, I said. I just want to be seen. I see you, he replied. And somehow, I believed him. That night, I lit my sandalwood candle, made a cup of chai, and sat by my window watching the city lights flicker like quiet applause. The blog. The podcast. The people who showed up at that community center. All of it was proof that walking away hadn't been a loss, it had been the first real win of my life. I thought about the girl I was in scene 1. Shocked, hollow, packing boxes in the middle of the night while upstairs a dog slept in my space. I wanted to tell her, you're going to be fine. Better than fine. And maybe, one day, I would tell her story all over again. Not as a wound. But as a victory. When I finally crawled into bed, I thought of Dad's words, I see you. It wasn't everything. It didn't erase the hurt. But it was a beginning. And sometimes, beginnings are enough. A month later, the flower shop downstairs bloomed in full spring colors. Buckets of tulips lined the sidewalk. The air was thick with the scent of hyacinths and wet soil. Customers came and went in soft murmurs, their voices carrying up through my open window. Life had settled into something gentle. Not perfect. Not without its aches. But steady. I had my routines now, morning tea in the window nook, writing until the sun shifted, recording podcast episodes in the squeaky armchair. My listener base had doubled in just 3 weeks. People were sending me their own letters, their own former good kid stories. And every time I read one, I felt less like I was healing in isolation and more like I was part of a quiet, sprawling movement. One afternoon, while editing an episode, I stumbled across the audio from my community center talk. I'd forgotten Harper had recorded it. I clicked play. Hearing my own voice say those words again. You can't shrink yourself small enough to make people love you right, sent a shiver through me. I thought about my parents. About how those words had landed differently for each of them. For Dad, as an invitation. For Mom, as a challenge she still didn't know how to take. And I realized something, I wasn't waiting for their reaction anymore. I was living my own. I glanced at the manila envelope Dad had given me, now tucked neatly on my bookshelf between The Secret Garden and the collected poems of Mary Oliver. I hadn't read all the letters yet. I was saving them, not out of avoidance, but out of respect for the version of myself who needed to feel ready. Because this journey wasn't about ripping the bandage off all at once. It was about deciding, finally, that the wound could be tended without reopening it every day. That evening, I wrote in my journal, "Freedom isn't just leaving. It's staying gone long enough to grow." And as I closed the book, I realized, I wasn't just surviving. I was blooming. The first warm night of the year arrived in late April. I carried a blanket and a thermos of chai up to the building's rooftop, the city stretching out beneath me in glittering waves of light. From up there, everything felt both small and endless. The cars like tiny sparks moving along veins of asphalt, the hum of life carrying on whether I was watching or not. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the draft of a letter I'd been working on. Not to my parents. Not to Jesse. To myself. Mira, you didn't imagine it. You didn't overreact. You weren't too sensitive. You saw what was real, and you honored it, even when it cost you. That's not weakness. That's courage. You have your own keys now. Your own space. Your own voice. And every word you write is another door opening for someone else. The girl who packed her life into boxes for the sake of a dog doesn't live here anymore. The woman who stayed behind does. And she's not going anywhere she doesn't choose. I hit save. Not send. It wasn't a letter meant for anyone else's eyes. As I sipped my chai, I thought back to that first night. The cold shock of my mom's text, the hollow ache in my chest, the fear that maybe I was walking away from everything and toward nothing. And now, here I was. With a home. With a purpose. With a community of strangers turned allies who saw me clearer than the people who raised me ever had. Before heading downstairs, I texted Dad, "Hope you're well. I'm making chai this weekend. You should stop by." His reply came a few minutes later, "Wouldn't miss it." As I closed the rooftop door behind me, I realized something. The letter I left on their dining table had been for them. But everything since had been for me. And for the first time, that felt like enough. If you want more stories like this, subscribe, give this a like, and share where you're tuning in from in the comments.